Welcome to the Empowered Investor Podcast. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the sheer volume of choices and voices telling you how to plan or invest for your future? With his straightforward approach, host Keith Matthews of Toulette Matthews & Associates cuts through the noise to help you create a winning action plan for you and your family. The decision-making framework discussed in this show can transform you and your investment experiences and will increase your odds of becoming financially secure. Learn more and subscribe today at tma-invest.com.
Welcome to the Empowered Investor. My name is Keith Matthews, and I'm joined by my co-host, Marcelo Taboada. Marcelo, how are you today?
I'm doing good. My son is growing very quickly. The reality of being a father is hitting me very quickly.
How old is Carmelo?
He's 8 months.
8 months. Is he walking?
Not yet, but he will soon.
You showed me a video yesterday. He's standing.
Yeah, he's standing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, tell us all about today's show. It is an exciting show. We have a phenomenal guest. Who do we have as a guest today?
We have Nicolas Bérubé from Presse. He is a critically acclaimed journalist. He's written books. He has a new book coming out in 2026. And he writes a weekly column called L'argent et le bonheur, which translates to money and happiness. But it's really the intersection between personal finance, the good life, and how he brings that together. He writes that every Sunday. It's a phenomenal newsletter.
Nicolas has been with us in 2 other occasions to discuss the book that he wrote, which I believe is now in 17 languages. And I told him the last time, I think he's one of the best personal finance journalists that has been around.
Yeah.
Whether it's in Canada or the United States.
I told him too that I consume a lot of newspapers and magazines and books every year, and I like his clarity of writing and delivering a message. It's very good.
Yeah, he takes concepts that are often murky and even individuals struggle to understand sometimes. And with the examples he uses and with the analogies and with the stories he tells, there's a lot of aha moments. And I know I had them when I read some of his work. So he's phenomenal. Not only that, he's a super nice guy. And we're very grateful. He's had a couple of shows with us. So what exactly are you guys talking about today?
We talked about a few specific columns that he's written. And I'll tell you something. They are a bit of a controversial subject sometimes because some people don't want to hear this stuff. And the reality is that you're a high-earning professional. There is a day, Keith, and we know this because we do this every day. There is a day that that last paycheck will stop coming. And I think a lot of people fail to realize that, and they think the good times will be here forever and a paycheck will be coming every month. And that's not true. So Nicolas writing about how much people are spending on restaurants and how that's affecting them financially. He's talking about how much people are spending in big cars right now compared to before and just how expensive it is and how it hurts people. He wrote a really nice column called Your Retirement is in Your Driveway. So he's writing about all this stuff. We talked about expectations and how that affects people. You know, we know now that people are vomiting wealth on social media constantly, every day. And, you know, this affects the way people spend and the way people manage their money. And the reality is, like I told you, you're 45, you're making great money, but that's not going to be the case every year. And chances are you don't have a pension either. So you do have to take care of your stuff early on, or you're going to stress a lot when you're older.
Absolutely. And I think one of the overriding themes that he presents is how to do well over the long term.
Correct.
So how to plan, how to have strategies, how to invest.
He teaches people how to think about, for example, we talked about it in the podcast, if you're coming up with the big expense, you got to think about the opportunity cost. It's not just the money you're spending today, but if you were to invest that and put it in a long-term vehicle like an index fund or something like that, that's, you know, he talks about that more in detail, but not in the podcast. It's just, it leads to better outcomes, but people need to be retrained to think about these things before they do big purchases. And we're doing too many things impulsively just because we want to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak.
So personal finance is a huge topic, and we always like to bring this subject to our listeners as much as possible. So Marcelo, thank you so much for reaching out. And I'll thank Nicolas right now, but I know you're going to thank him at the end. Thank you, Nicolas, for participating in today's podcast.
Enjoy the conversation. Nicolas, thank you so much for joining the Empowered Investor Podcast. I am super excited to have you on the show. The whole team is excited to have you on the show. Most of our listeners read your columns, and I know I'm a huge fan. My brother is a huge fan. I have a few friends that read your work regularly, and they are very excited also that I'm going to be sharing this episode with them. But before I start, talk to me about your journey as a journalist. Like, I find it's very remarkable, the path you've had. So I want to know more about that.
Well, first of all, Marcelo, thank you for having me and having me on your podcast. I appreciate it. So my journey as a journalist started, wow, when I was actually in university in UCAM. I decided that I wanted to write for the student paper there. That's the first time I decided to write. The reason I went and saw them and told them I want to write for you is I had read a biography of René Lévesque, the former prime minister of Quebec. And one of the things I admire about him was that he was a journalist before he was a politician. So I had this notion that, oh, well, when you're in university, you want to write for the school newspaper. And that's what I did. And that led me to a career in journalism. I had no idea I wanted to do that. I discovered that basically by accident by working at this student newspaper. So long story short, after that, I was a freelancer and then I worked for La Presse. And I've been with La Presse for now 23 years. Yes, 23 years. I've done a lot of stuff for La Presse. I was for 7 years a US correspondent based out of Los Angeles. That was fun. That was a lot of travel and a lot of experiences there. And for the past 5 or 6 years, I've been writing more and more about money. I can get into later maybe how I came to write about money, but it's very fulfilling. I feel that I'm doing work that is appreciated by the readers, because when you're a reporter, you're basically a jack of all trades, right? You can be writing about trade war one day and then recession the next day and then about a local issue the next day. So what I've specialized a bit into writing about money and investment, and I feel it resonates a lot with readers because not a lot of people talk about those topics in the media on a regular basis. And it's a kind of a public service in a way because people want to hear opinions that is not associated with a product or with a company. So I feel that's a big plus. So basically, that's the journey I took for my career up to this point.
We're not doing video episodes yet, so I hope you don't blush about the compliment I'm about to give you, but I think you are a remarkable communicator. I consume a lot of books yearly. I like reading. It's one of my passions, but I think a lot of people can write and are good writers, but very few are excellent communicators and simplifiers of information. I find your columns are very concise, very easy to understand, very digestible, and they are very smart, very intuitive at the same time. And that's a very hard balance to achieve. So I'm just curious, like, did you always have this style of writing, or is this something that evolved over the years? Like, how have you evolved as a writer?
Well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate it. I feel that it's a crowded field. A lot of people are very good in that field. It's fun to see what others are writing and to get ideas from them as well. But basically, my style of writing was mostly the same. I like to write the way I like to read in a way. Like I'm always thinking about the reader. Like, why would I read this? Why would I not just turn the page? So turn the page is maybe a bit old-fashioned way to see this. Maybe click on a link or do something else or go wash the dishes or go for a walk. Why would I read this? When you approach writing in that way, you're always it's a balancing act, right? You're trying to get a point across, but you're trying to entertain the reader. Maybe entertain is not the right word, but you're trying to make the reader want to keep on reading in a way. So, and sometimes you can write something and you read it an hour later or the day later and you say, wow, who's the crazy person who wrote this? This is so bad. So you always have to keep it fresh in that sense. The fact of doing it and interacting with readers, I get between, I don't know, I would say maybe 20 and 50 emails a week, basically, from readers. So I get instant feedback, right? So I would say 95% is positive. I mean, I'm surprised. I always think that I'm going to get yelled at for some reason, but it doesn't happen with these topics. There's a big appetite for this kind of information. So I'm always surprised that people are not mad at me or yelling at me, which is often the case these days in the media. Mostly, I think they see me as an ally or a soundboard. Sometimes people tell me about their portfolio and tell me about their ideas and should I do this or what do you think of that? So it's a very fun place to be at, basically. I'm just sitting here reading, thinking, responding to readers as best as I can, giving them links or information to people to contact because most of the time I can't, go into details about their situation. But it's an interesting, place to be at the intersection of what the academics are telling us and what the reader is telling us. That's what I find interesting.
Yeah, and you're in a very privileged position of some sorts because you have an ability to influence a lot of people and do a lot of good. And the fact that you get instant feedback is amazing. I always read those columns when people send you questions, and I find the questions are very smart sometimes. And like you think there's a lot of people out there who are thinking about things the right way. They just need a little bit of guidance. And the problem is, as you know, in the financial services industry, a lot of it is product selling and packaging products. So a lot of those people sometimes end in the wrong hands, and that leads to wrong financial situations. But anyways, that's a conversation for another day. I'm just curious to know, if you allow me to move on here, the genesis of your column, the L'argent et le bonheur, which is money and happiness. How did that came about? How has your thinking changed and evolved over time?
The column started in 2022 called Les millionnaires ne sont pas ceux que vous croyez, or so the millionaires are not who you think they are. And the book is about millionaires in Quebec. And I got my inspiration from The Millionaire Next Door. People might be familiar with that. But it's more than just The Millionaire Next Door. It's also an investing book as well. So I felt that there was a need for the French market to talk about these topics. So after that book came about, my boss decided, hey, why don't we have a column every Sunday, and then we can have this newsletter that will be shipped. The column is shipped the next day to almost 40,000 subscribers now. And so that's how it came about. But the idea is to talk about markets and money in a way that's approachable and fun to read, basically. So I've been doing that and been, having ideas for more books. That's where we are today.
It's very nice. And like I said, the column is a must read. I religiously read it every Sunday. I grab my coffee on Sunday and I always read it. I always tell my wife, you have to read this article. This is what I've been saying. And I just can't write it that eloquently, but we always have those moments, and I send it to a bunch of friends. There's a few specific columns I want to talk to you about today. And I think they relate well to the subject that, the topics I want to cover. And you wrote one recently about how can we decouple our personal finances from the United States due to the everything that's going on with Trump. So let's just get into that. How did that come about? And if we can leave the listeners with some of the actionable items that you had there, that was interesting to me.
I felt that it was this anger. Canadians and Quebecers were not typically that angry. I mean, we're angry about, the state of hospitals and things like that, not being able to find parking, but we're typically not angry at other countries that much. I mean,
No.
Here and there, of course, there are little things, but what we're going through now is so different and so anything I've seen in my life. And I'm not a militant person. I'm not, I don't have an axe to grind, or I don't have an agenda. And usually I'm writing about, you should not react to the market, you should not react to the media, to the news. But I feel that now we're in this territory where, it's not our choice, but we have to react to something that was done to us or imposed on us. So I gave the readers, if they want to boycott US companies, this is how they can do it. They can unsubscribe from Netflix, they can cancel their subscription, they can stop buying American products at the grocery store. So it became this list. Also, a lot of readers are interested in
knowing these things for sure.
Yes, how can you invest without investing in US companies? Well, that's really difficult because a lot of funds are well diversified. And when you want to diversify a fund, you have companies from all over the world into that fund. But there are ways to do it moving forward. There are funds that are excluding US companies or excluding Canadian companies. They were not designed, so the investor could boycott the US per se, but it's just that there are funds that are excluding certain sectors. So I like to point to those funds, but mostly I'm not pushing for disinvesting from the US at this point. I mean, there's no right way to do this. And first of all, it wouldn't change much because, the market is so big. I mean, there would be a buyer in the next second and nobody would feel pain at any point in that process, maybe except the person who's selling. So it's not a right way to go about doing this, but I felt like that telling people about funds that are excluding US companies was a good service to them. So that's what I did.
I find that article very timely as well, because I think a lot of people, even if you don't want to go on the investing side, at least with the choices you consume every day, you can at least have an impact. Again, it won't be that big of an impact because you think of the size of the two markets, right? But I moved here, I think about 15, 16 years ago, and I have never seen so much unity in the country in Canada. Canada has always been an interesting concept to me because you have 10 provinces and every province is like their own little country, and then they come together in this like one country, and it feels like a different type of nationalism or patriotism like what they have in other countries. But now I feel like the country's united in that type of way, that we're all like coming together and saying like, we're Canadian, we need to be ready for this and we need to unite to be better. Like that's nice to see too.
I haven't seen this in my life. I'm 47 years old, and that's the first time I see this strong reaction and strong unity. I mean, and I wouldn't have predicted it. I mean, it was nothing, especially in Quebec, as you know, we're not super, enthusiastic about flying the Canadian flag necessarily all the time. But right now, it's really something that you see. When I buy flour, I look, oh, is it from Canada? Oh, yes. Okay. So I will buy that flour. I never used to do that. And same thing with other kind of produce. People are really mad at what's going on, and they should be. I mean, we played by the rules, basically. We didn't do anything wrong. That's what makes it more, I think, tragic and sad in a way, but we have to react. We didn't do anything to deserve this. So yeah, I really feel that we're in a moment that doesn't have a precedent, at least in my lifetime.
We'll see how that plays out. But the next thing I want to ask you is, this is my favorite column that you've written, in my opinion. I'm going to destroy the French translation, but it was something like my recipe for happiness, or ma recette pour le bonheur. Am I right on that one? And it was you describing how you embrace the practice of gracefulness and gratefulness, and adopting that as a lifestyle choice and how that makes everything better. So talk to me a little bit about that, and how did that idea come about? And then how can we become better at practicing gratefulness?
It's interesting because when you talk about money, you always talk about, this kind of distant future where compounding will have made us all rich and well off. And so there's always this notion that, around the corner, something better is there and you should strive to get it. And that, to a certain point, is true. I mean, if all we do is spend all day on the couch, play video games, it might be fun in the moment, but it's not constructive and it's not something that will fulfill us in the long run. But at the same time, I feel that we need to realize, that's a theme I like to talk about a lot, is that, man, we live amazing lives. I mean, historically, just having hot water at your fingertips. I mean, not a lot of humans, over 100 billion humans lived on this earth. And not a lot of those 100 billion humans had running water, had a working fridge full of food, have healthy children. I mean, that's something we take for granted, right? If you have 3 kids, you have 3 kids. Well, guess what? 200 years ago, if you wanted 3 kids, you needed to have 7. So 3 could live a healthy life, okay? And we forget this the instant it disappears, this childhood mortality rate. The instant it's gone, it's like poof, like it's never happened. So sometimes I like to really put the emphasis on that. Also, the column you're referring to was about my own experience with that, because a decade ago, me and my wife were trying to have a child, and it was difficult. It was not unique to me. Many people go through this, but it made me realize I could not hang the hat of happiness on the fact that I will be able to have a child or not, because that was out of my control, right?
Correct.
And so this kind of made me realize that we need to focus on the little things in life that are within our control and that should bring more happiness that they do. Just the fact that we can breathe, that we can walk, that we can talk. Just what I mentioned, I mean, hundreds of millions of people would like to be able to be doing that. So it's very easy in our world to get caught up into what we don't have and what we want, and this little carrot that we're running after without realizing that we have it pretty good right this moment. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you have a phone, you have earphones, you have probably a belly full of food. I mean, these are things that we take for granted, but it's pretty remarkable that these things can happen day after day. So that's what I like to talk about to readers that are sometimes complaining about, things that they don't have, or the government, or whatever the topic of the day is.
The story ends in a happy ending. I mean, you do mention in the column that you have a son. I think a son, is it right?
Yes, I have one son, and he's a healthy 11-year-old, almost 12 years old.
Wow.
That's the happy ending. It was difficult to conceive a child and painful emotionally at times, but now we're a little family. So that was a plus. I mean, that's, of course, the joy of my life. But at the time, I made a conscious effort to not be this sad and lonely, person because it was hard. I think we should do that, no matter what. If you're looking for a big job or big promotion or big bonus or whatever it is, we should not tie our happiness to this outcome that may or may not happen. That's a recipe for disaster. If it happens, it's fine. It's a plus, but it's not who you are. I mean, you remain who you are with your abilities and your strengths.
It's a bit of the malaise of modernity that we are living now, that we have a lot of excess and we have wealth and we have health and we have a lot of abundance, but we seem to be living in this crisis, this almost existential crisis of depression, loneliness, mental health issues. So why do you think that is? I mean, you just described that in the column, that it's because we're always chasing, but is there something more here at play? Maybe it's social media. How do you think about this?
We're exposed to a lot of negative news. And as a reporter, I say that, and I'm maybe part of the problem as well. And when you step out for a second and you stop paying attention to so much negativity, it really helps. I mean, I was recently on a trip in Mexico, and for more than a week, I didn't look at my phone. I didn't follow the news. And guess what? Like, the sun came up the next day. I mean, sometimes I feel it's self-imposed, this diet of doom and gloom. But to your point, I think a lot of the big human endeavor has been to make life easier for us and our children. I mean, at first you had to get water, you need to get a bucket and go to the river. But then somebody invented the canal so the water could get to you. Oh, wow, that's good. I don't have to spend 5 hours a day just go about and finding water. Same thing with hunting. I mean, that was life before, and now you just go to the grocery store. So all these problems that, we had for centuries and millennia have been solved for us by people who were here before us. So that leaves us in a better place than they were. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword, because it can make life seems too easy at some point, and we might lose sight of the things that are important, and we might lose sight of the things that are incredible happening in our life. I mean, just if you're driving a car, man, this should blow your mind every time you turn the key. I mean, you have this machine that 99% of the people know how to build if they had to. And this machine is just waiting for you to turn the key to drive you 6 hours away and hundreds of kilometers away, just sitting there. And then you just have a Mazda, so you're sad because you don't have this Lexus, right? So this is almost like National Geographic level of craziness when you think about it. It's just we're kind of comparing our feathers to the feather of the bird next to us, and the peacock has more colors than I do, so blah, 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 blah. So we have this crazy mechanism that goes on in our life that kind of prevents us from seeing all the good things that are currently happening. That's one thing I like to point out to readers. And again, good reactions. I keep telling myself, oh, you can't write that. You'll get slaughtered by the readers, but somehow, no, they give me a pass. I don't know why. Maybe one day.
This is something that we touched upon with Daniel Crosby in the podcast we were mentioning before off mic. It's people are dying to have these conversations. People are thirsty to have deep conversations, to talk about subjects that are important. And it's tough to ask those questions. I find that in my client meetings, sometimes I do throw questions like that, like what are your values? What does money mean to you in relation to your happiness? And more deeper questions. And I'm surprised about how much people open up. And even with friends, it's the same thing. So I'm not surprised to hear that people, like when you write about these things, it resonates well with listeners, because I think we're dying to talk about these things and things that are meaty and with a lot of substance.
The culture that is around us makes things acceptable. Like it's perfectly, for example, recently I wrote about Uber Eats. Okay. I like to make fun of the whole Uber Eats thing, because I think very, very few people should be using those services, at least if they're not millionaires yet. Because if you're trying to be a millionaire in your life, eventually with your assets, you should definitely not use those services. I say, oh, Uber Eats should be a service that we use every time our assets go up by 50,000. And I said, if you don't have $50,000 yet to your name, well, the last thing you need in your life is a private driver for your burrito. This is not rocket science, but somehow my kids, they see on YouTube, they see Uber Eats ad every 10 minutes and they think it's normal. And I'm hungry, I need a snack. The Uber Eats driver will be there in 15 minutes and bring me my snack. So it becomes kind of the air we breathe. It's normal. And I like to point out, no, it's not normal. You should not be using this, at least if you're aiming for more independence with your money. But every time I write that, I'm like, oh man, people are going to be so mad at this. And no, I haven't received one email about that, or you're too extreme, or why are you saying this? So I guess I agree with you. You're right. People want to hear like this advice, or maybe they won't use it in their life that much, but they want to know that it's there and that there's a reflection, there's a thought that has been put into this, and not to accept everything, every offer like blindly. So I think that's appealing to people to some degree.
Absolutely. So I think that's a good segue for the next topic I want to talk to you about, which is my second favorite column that you wrote is Ta retraite est dans ton driveway.
Yeah.
So your retirement is in your driveway. And my wife's going to roll her eyes right now. And everybody that knows me, because I say this all the time, expectations have gone up exponentially. If you think about like the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I think about my own childhood. I remember the restaurant was a special occasion. The cars we drove were smaller. The houses we lived were smaller. Hardwood floors and granite counters were luxuries. It seems like all those things have become necessities. The family vacation was a camping trip. Now, 2 trips to Europe is the norm. A $20,000 trip to Disney with the kids is the norm. So, yes, I hear that for young people, it's harder to buy homes and to get ahead in life. I do acknowledge those things, but I feel like our expectations have gone up exponentially. And I think the cars is a big part of this. I see the cars we drive. We did the experience with my wife shopping for a few new cars, even used cars, because we wanted a bigger car. We didn't end up doing it, but the cost of these things is astronomical.
You're right. And the car is such a good example of this because it's so visible. And it's the intersection of success and money and the way people see us and the way we see ourselves, the advertising, all of that, the intersection of all that is a car. And also, of course, personal finance, as you mentioned, with your retirement is in your driveway. That's a good concept to have. The car has become a necessity. It's just something that you have. So people don't see it that way. They don't see the opportunity cost of a car. But I see it all the time. I see 30-year-old people driving $100,000 car. And of course, for a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of them, you're a representative on the road and you have to have a nice car or something like that, of course. But for a lot of people, it's a trophy in a way. It's a way to show that you have success. I get that. The only problem is that this car doesn't cost you, $900 a month. That car costs you probably closer to $10,000 a month. Why? Well, because all that money that will never compound for you for the rest of your life, that's a very expensive car that you drive. And again, if people know that, if they get it, well, sure, okay, buy the car. But people don't see the link between a car payment and retiring at 55 instead of 65. They don't see the connection, but the connection is right in front of their eyes. And so we're going through a strange time in the economy right now. And I feel that people who got this message like maybe 5 years ago are in a much better place today to deal with uncertainty and to deal with what might come about. I feel that a lot of people are living, paycheck to paycheck, and it's all good and well if there's a paycheck. There might not be one day. So I always try to remind readers of that, and to, as you mentioned, a lot of things are more expensive. I don't want to deny that. The housing is more expensive, rent is more expensive, everything is. But there are choices. Just to give one example, everyone has to have a phone, right? Okay, so how much is a phone? Well, a phone can be $125 a month. If you want the latest iPhone, that's $125 a month. Or the plan I have is $20 a month with my phone. So we're talking about a phone. There's a whole range of possibilities for a phone, but it's the same thing with everything. If you want a car, you can go on Marketplace and buy one for $12,000. It will be a Honda Civic that is 10, 12 years old, maybe. So that's a car. Or you can go to the dealership and pay 5 times that amount, and you will also get a car that will get you to the same place you need to go. So I feel that there's this abundance of choice, and we need to keep that in mind when we make our buying decisions. And one way to make people see that is to talk to them about opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of not investing that money is huge, especially when you're young. One column I wrote, I think it was a year or two ago, was you don't go to restaurants unless you have gray hair. Okay, so look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. Do I have gray hair? Yes. Okay, here's a restaurant. Do I have gray hair? No. Oh, no restaurant for you. So, people reacted to that. And of course, I'm half serious, saying that. I guess, of course, people can, if it's your birthday or your friend's birthday or exceptions, it's fine. But sometimes I go to restaurants or brunch during the weekend, and the average age in the place is maybe 20 years old. And it's fun. I was 20 once, and I didn't really take care of my money that much. But it just reminds me that what becomes normal, you can always question it, right? The norm. Who says what's normal? Who says it's normal to have a pad thai delivered to your door for $35? Like, who decided that was normal? Like, there's no norm. You should you should form your own path and find out what's normal for you and find out what brings you happiness and do those things instead of just go about and do what everyone is doing.
When we think about happiness, there's two things that are working against us. I'm 37, but I was that person of 20, 22, 23, who was being lured by all these things. And the fact that we're getting social media just vomiting people showing their wealth constantly, with trips, restaurants, cars, jewelry. And like, this is tough for teenagers and young people coming up into adulthood. I think that's a very rough thing to have constantly in your phone all the time. And then second layer of that is also how we think about happiness and the two types of happiness, right? Hedonic happiness and eudemonic happiness. Hedonic happiness will be, the pleasures we're discussing here, going to the restaurant, going for a trip. I think those are necessary for a fulfilling life up to a certain point. The problem is they don't lead to long-lasting happiness. Eudemonic happiness is more happiness that comes from having a purpose, working on something greater than yourself. I think about you and your career, and like, you have this beautiful career of like influencing people and talking to people about things that are important in life and having gratefulness and being responsible with money. So we are pursuing too much the hedonic happiness instead of the other. And I think the combination of these things is making us miserable.
You're right. And I think it's probably harder. That's not very original, but I think it's probably harder for a 20-year-old today than it was when I was 20-year-old, maybe 25 years ago.
You compared yourself to your neighbors. That's the problem. Like, we compare ourselves to everyone in the world.
Exactly. And then also the offer, right? When I was younger, if you want to go to a restaurant, well, there was the Greek place and there was the pizza place, and that's about it. But now you have all these restaurants and these cool Instagram ready decor that you can take a selfie with. And I get it. It's exciting. It's flashy. It's fun. But at the same time, you have to take a step back and think about how about finding long-term happiness. I'm a big fan of talking about today. Like, what are you doing today at your desk or in your house? What steps are you taking? Because we're talking about the things like a fulfilling career. That's very, very hard to grasp or to even aim at, right? It's so abstract or so far in the future. But what I like to remind people is what's in front of you today, or what are you doing today that you will be happy that you did 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So if you want to be, I don't know, a writer, or if you want to be a leader in your field, 10 years from now, there'll be a leader in your field 10 years from now. There'll be a great writer 10 years from now, great reporter 10 years from now, great investor 10 years from now. These people will exist. So what these people are doing today to fulfill these big shoes that we see in the future? Well, they're doing something today. Like, if you want to be the next Conor McDavid in 10 years, what is the next Conor McDavid doing today? Is he on this couch smoking cigarettes and eating pizza? Probably not. He's probably at the hockey rink working there. So I like to put the emphasis on what in the present time we can do. And some things, as you mentioned, are, of course, we can be happy by doing fun stuff today, but also a big portion of it is to do hard stuff and do stuff that we love as well, like reading, like getting deeper in knowledge. Like, if you're into, I don't know, personal finance, well, you should read 10 personal finance blog a day. You should be a resource for people around you, and you should listen to financial podcasts and be sure to be up to date with all that stuff. And for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, it doesn't really matter. But after a few months, a few years, all these things, they compound, and you'll be ahead of the people that are the same age as you are. And you'll be ahead of, frankly, many people who are older than you are. So that's a concept. I know the partner of Warren Buffett, in Charlie Munger, who died over a year ago, he was a big proponent of the here and now and doing the hard work now. As I get older, I realize the wisdom of his words, because you have all these big concepts that are abstract, but all we have is today and the way we spend our time today. And at the end of the day, you're the sum of everything you did in those moments.
The head of the company, Keith Matthews, and he hosts a podcast. I think you've done a podcast with him as well. He said something to me when I just started here about 10 years ago. It always stuck with me. He said, you either stress the first 45 years of your life or the last 45 years of your life. Like, you have to choose very wisely. And that stuck with me because it is true. Like, a lot of the people, you see a lot of lives being derailed because they party too much, they chill too much, they pursue too much the hedonic happiness in those 45 years. And then they find themselves in the later parts of their lives. It's not a very good life, and the trajectory doesn't look very good, as opposed to somebody who's working hard and building something. And look, I'm not saying, and this is what people get confused with this message, is I'm not saying people shouldn't invest in their health and invest in their friendships. And as a matter of fact, the one thing that shows that happiness, that makes a good life in the long term, is our relationships, not the money that we have. But you need a balance of those things. Just because you go all in, it doesn't mean you're going to work 80 hours a week and neglect your happiness and your family and your relationships. But it is okay to work towards something else, towards your career. Like, people shouldn't be ashamed of that, I don't think.
There's this notion also of, oh, you deprive yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, you invest your money or you save, but you're depriving yourself. And I always think back to my 20s, because you're right. We need to think about those things ideally, as soon as possible. If you're 55, well, you're 55. But ideally, if you think about those things in your late teens or early 20s, you have an amazing advantage because you have such a long runway in front of you. But a lot of people think, oh, you're depriving yourself. But when I think about my 20s, the best moment I had was with my friends, and we would make a big dinner at home. And everybody will bring or cook, or, oh, I'm bringing wine, I'm bringing this, I'm bringing that. And we end up with 7 or 8 people just eating a great dinner at home. And these are great memories, friends that I still have today. That day, we could have gone out to a restaurant. Would I have been happier? I don't think so. I mean, the happiness was not the meal itself, was like we prepared it and we were a bunch of friends. And the company and all that. So we spent maybe, I don't know, $10, $15, $20 each, compared to 5 or 7 times that amount if we would have gone out to a restaurant that day. So if you think about different things in life that way, there's no depriving. I mean, if I can go to my meeting riding my bike, I'm outside, there's the sun, I'm doing exercise. Of course, I could have taken my car to go there. Okay, so am I depriving myself because I rode my bike? Of course not. It's a plus, it's not a minus. You think about those things that way. You're probably familiar with him. There's this blogger, Mr. Money Mustache.
Yeah.
Pete Adney. He's a Canadian living in Colorado, and he has this amazing blog that you should all check out if you're not familiar. But he's gone through those big topics on his blog. One of his main focus is about this notion that we're depriving ourselves. I mean, if you're building and renovating your house and you're 28, are you depriving yourself compared to the person who bought a brand new house and paid like 3 times the amount? No, because you're solving problems, you're working with your body, you're learning at the same time. So I think we can apply that in a lot of fields in our life. And at the end, it compounds and it makes a big difference in your health, in your wealth, and in your satisfaction with life over time.
100%. I think about the journey my wife and I have had. We're both immigrants. We don't come from wealthy families. We had to work and, get ourselves into debt to put ourselves through school. And I remember we rented this small apartment a little bit far of the city, and we rented it because we wanted to buy a house eventually. So we were paying cheap rent and we were saving aggressively. So what that meant is like we didn't travel much. We didn't go out that much, but our social life is very active. We would have friends over. We would go over to friends, go to the park. And I'm going to be honest with you, it feels, we're human, right? So it felt bad when seeing like people traveling and doing all these cool things. But at the end of the day, I tell my wife, look, we still have a very happy life because we have cherished relationships, strong relationships. And now we own a home and we're building towards that home, and now we use the home to host people and have people in our backyard. And, maybe we haven't traveled that much, but we are so blessed that, we have a son now and we have good friends and we have good family and we see each other often. And I feel like that is a very good recipe for success. But I've had to check myself and put in a lot of the work and introspection to come to understand this. And of course, you're always human and you need those constant reminders that, ground yourself, it's going to be okay. And we're working towards something, and it's okay not to be going to Greece every year, right? Like, even though I would love to, nothing wrong with that. But I think that we're taking care of having a solid retirement and working towards a home and building a family. So I think even when you understand these things, it takes a lot of work to ground yourself and understand it and at a very granular level.
It's true. And all the successful people we see around us today have gone through this path, because it's easy to see the success without seeing all that came before the success. One example I will give very quickly is Steven Jarilovsky, the famous Montrealer who's a billionaire today, who founded Jarilovsky Fraser investing firm. He's 99 years old. He's almost 100. I had the privilege of interviewing him a few years ago for my first book. He's this guy now, very successful in a big house in Westmount and blah, blah, blah. It's very difficult to see the connection between a person like that and the regular person on the street. But what he told me is, he said, when I was young, I would walk everywhere. I would not spend my money on taxis or things like that, or restaurants or anything like that. I would rent a small room. This is how I built wealth over time. I think his Mercedes Benz is like 25 years old or something like that. And he says, like, it works. My friend, they tease me all the time, but my car works perfectly and it's fine. I'd rather have my money compound instead of having it sit in my driveway doing nothing for me. So it's important to remind us that people we admire left and right, they were 20 at one point and they made their decision as well. A lot of people admire people like Jeff Bezos. Well, Jeff Bezos, he lived a pretty frugal life when he started Amazon. He was thinking about every little purchase for his company. He was double checking himself, not to go into debt too much. So he made these conscious decisions. So it's the same thing with us. I mean, we're all humans. We're attracted to nice things. But if you can have the notion of compounding in your head, it's very helpful to help you make decision. And you mentioned the trips. When my son, now we're just starting traveling with my son because he's 10 years old and I feel that he's more able to engage with the place where we go and remember these things. But for the first few years of his life, a baby, you bring the baby to the park at the end of the street. And it's like you brought the baby to Disneyland. He's so happy to be there and play with his friends. And so for the first few years, we didn't travel much. We just stayed around and our baby was perfectly happy. But all that money we saved has grown since then. So every trip we take now is costing way less of my salary that it would have had because the money had time to compound over this period of time. So in a way, it's delayed gratification in a way, this concept of not having your cookie today and having 2 cookies in a month or something. But it's really true. I mean, getting older is not super fun. But one of the good things is that you can see all these concepts that you read about, you can see them happening in your life and you can see them working their magic in a way. So that's one of the fulfilling thing. And then you can talk about them in a more honest way, or you know what you're talking about. And you see examples of people around you who didn't do this and who are not in a great position today.
I always say, we here at Gillette Matthews and Associates, we are in a privileged position because we get to have a positive impact on our clients. And we see those cases of, sometimes somebody comes across the door and they started saving a bit too late and now they're 55 and, it doesn't look good. And I feel for it. So we get exposed to all these things. So I feel like, I wouldn't say wisdom, but the knowledge I have of life and how I think about, money and happiness, I'm a bit privileged because I get to see all these cases on a day-to-day basis and I see the good sides as well. But yeah, it's interesting how we think about these things. And I feel like with babies too, it's also another opportunity for people to show their status and their wealth. And this can leave you in a bigger hole. Like I find we went through this process with my wife and, we used Marketplace, we used friends who have kids. They would gift us stuff, we would buy stuff from them and, recycle across the family. But people are spending $2,000 on a stroller and people are buying like very expensive things that are not needed for a baby. And, I feel the industry also pulls you in don't you want the best things for your baby? Why wouldn't you spend on this? It's very luring in that way. So yeah, I don't know if you had any thoughts about that.
First-time parents are especially prone to that. I mean, by the time you have your 3rd or 4th kid, you're like, yeah, whatever, just use whatever it's around that we can move the baby in because you've lost this shine of the new objects have lost their appeal because you have more of a perspective. Like, yeah, a Walmart stroller will bring your kid to the grocery store as well as a $2,000 stroller will. But yeah, there's a whole market around that. And again, if you have no concept of opportunity cost, why not? The money is there. I'm getting paid next month. My bonus is in 2 months, blah, blah, blah. Let's do this. The comment I get most from readers, and by far, is like, oh, I wish I knew that when I was 20. That's like by far the most common comment I get from readers, because learning about this, as you say, in your 50s, it's better than not learning about it anyway. But if you learn about it earlier in life, the amount you need to put aside is smaller. And this is what people don't get because, oh, well, you're in your 20s. Why would you bother saving money, blah, blah, blah? Well, the way it works is that you have to save less of your paycheck. And some people can even stop saving at like 40 years old. And they'll end up wealthier than a person who starts saving at 40 years old. So all these counterintuitive notions that are out there and are doing a lot of harm to people. That's what I like to write about because it's so counterintuitive. Like when I'm 25, I say, oh, in 10 years, I'm going to make way more money. That's when I start worrying about this. But that's the wrong way to go about, because in 10 years, you'll have kids, and you'll have trips, you'll have soccer teams, you'll have all these things that you don't have today in your life. So you should go about thinking about those things earlier, and then it will make your life easier. I start saving money maybe, I don't know, 15 years before I had my child, and it's the best decision I've ever made, because it's almost today, it's like playing a video game on cheat mode, right? You don't really feel that there's any danger because the money is there. Oh, I want to go to this summer camp. Do you know how summer camp costs? How much they cost? Man, it's like over $2,000 for 10 days or something like that. A lot of people go into debt, or they go into the line of credit to pay for these things, and they'll pay it over a few months. But knowing that the money is there to these one-time expenses makes the whole thing much more easier and much more enjoyable. Every decision is not a life and death decision. So I want to say it's a perk or it's a bonus, but really it's more central than that. It's more complex. It really changes your outlook on life. It changes the way you will make your decisions about your career, because you know that you can rely on your investments, you can rely on money you set aside. It's really, really powerful to apply these lessons in your life.
We had a client here who's a bit younger. He started saving diligently. I've been working with that couple for about 10 years now. They've just been saving diligently. When he hit like about 48, 49, he started struggling in his career, in terms of health issues and, like burnout and stuff like that. Guess what? He left his job and he started his own entrepreneurial endeavor. But the only way he did it is because now the compounding has gotten to the point that it's just carrying them. And, with the lifestyle they have, they're in a position that, even if they don't save another penny, they're going to be okay in retirement, because now they built the assets already and the mortgage is almost paid. And you flip the coin and you say he have no retirement savings. There's no way in hell he can take that decision.
That's such a good example, because 50 years old is like you're too young to retire. And sometimes you're too old to learn a new field or start a new career in most cases. So 50 years old is the age where you never, never want something bad happening to you, like a recession or, as you mentioned, a health issue. I feel that's like the worst, basically, case scenario. But it happens all the time. That's what people don't notice. Oh, I'll work until I'm 65 or 75 or 80. I love what I do. Well, you might not get a say. Okay, if you get a heart attack at 52, guess what? You're not working until you're 80, even if you love your job. So I feel that we should prepare for all these quote unquote worst case scenarios. And if they don't materialize, well, great. You have this freedom, you have this time, you have this low stress level that not a lot of your peers have. It really makes a big difference in your life.
Listen, Nicolas, we can talk for hours. I don't want to keep you here longer than I should. Just before you go, I want you to tell me what's your recipe for a good life. And I want you to leave the listeners with 1 or 2, 3 takeaways that you can give them today that they can implement to have a better life.
A good life for me, basically, it's a succession of great days, of days that you do what you love. And even if you're in your field and if you're happy with your career, there will be days where there'll be problems. There'll be days that are difficult and stressful, and that's okay. But if you can keep those days to a minimum, let's say 30%, and the good days are 70%, well, that's already winning the game compared to many people who are in debt and struggling. So try to learn a little bit every day, read a few pages of a book every day, and try to get better that way in your field and get ahead. So that's what it is. It's just a succession of days. That's all we have anyway. And if you do the right things, it compounds over time and it will lead to a good place. And one of the books I could recommend, I've read recently, is a great book. It's called Smile by Andrew Allam. He's a Canadian author.
Yeah, he's been on the podcast.
He's been on your podcast. Yes,
Yeah.
I was not 100% sure, but now I remember. So he's the author of his most well-known book is Millionaire Teacher.
Yeah.
He became a millionaire in his late 30s on a high school teacher's salary. And since then, he's been traveling the world. He's basically retired now from his teaching job, but he's still writing financial blogs and books. But his latest book called Smile is super interesting because it's at the intersection of money and happiness and the way to lead a good life. So everything we've been talking about today, I think it really resonate for me, what he wrote in that book. And eventually I'd like to write a book like that. He did it really well, so I'm not sure it needs to be done, but it's easier to write about what the S&P 500 did yesterday and to talk about all the things we've been discussing today. So
any specific pieces of advice for our listeners on how to practice gratefulness, how to be better at keeping yourself grounded, anything you can think about?
Be grateful for living in a peaceful country, being in good health. That's the most important things. And we always lose track of this. I try to remind me every single day that hundreds of millions of people will trade place with me in an instant. When you go about thinking like that, it makes a big difference. And another piece of advice is don't buy something that you're buying because other people will see it and think of you differently because you bought this. Because you know what? Most people don't think about us that much. For a few years, I've been wearing the same T-shirt to work. Well, not the exact same. I have a dozen of T-shirts, but I've been wearing, if you will, a uniform at work. And it didn't make any difference at all in the way people perceive me. And that was actually a story I wrote for the paper, but it's an interesting experiment and that people should try. So a lot of the things we buy, we think we need and we know we need and we must have this. The pleasure of having those things fades over time and it fades very quickly. And so if people can keep that in mind and make their decisions according to this, I think it will be very helpful for their happiness, for their finance, for their future, basically. So just try to keep that in mind. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much for joining us, Nicolas, and I appreciate your time tremendously.
It's been a pleasure, Marcelo. Thanks a lot for having me.
You've been listening to the Empowered Investor Podcast, hosted by Keith Matthews. Please visit tma-invest.com to subscribe to this podcast, learn more about how his firm helps Canadian investors, or to request a complimentary copy of The Empowered Investor. Investments and investing strategies should be evaluated based on your own objectives. Listeners of this podcast should use their best judgment and consult a financial expert prior to making any investment decisions based on the information found in this podcast.